I don't believe you when you tell me this is a hangout for Tren de Aragua and MS-13. Like, well, and the Hells Angels? That makes no sense. I believe you, Cameron. I don't believe the government when it comes to this. I was arguing with some moron named my cousin Vinny over on Piers Morgan earlier today, and he kept being like, what, do you think the government is lying to us about these guys being gang members? I was like, yes. Yes, I do, Vinny. I think the government is lying. Hey, I'm Tim Miller.
I'm Cameron Kasky, and this is FYPod, our Gen Z show here at the Bulwark, where Gen Z expert Cameron Kasky talks about things like Ross Perot and Foghorn Leghorn and all the stuff my generation cares about. Vapes. So we've got a crazy week. We've got a lot of crazy topics, but I want to start with a new segment, a brand new segment, fresh, called Gen Z Life Advice to Boomers.
Okay, great.
I get so much advice from my elders in my life. I wanted to return the favor and offer some, honestly, not just to boomers, but also to our Gen X and millennial listeners. You ready for this?
Fire away. Let's hear it.
Write stuff down about your kids and grandkids. Take a journal, Google Doc, whatever it is. I have been losing sleep at night thinking about my grandfather who died in October. And I have been, as I put it to my therapist, trying to reconcile the tragedy of his loss with the miracle of his existence. And it's been really challenging for me because he gave us so much to be grateful for. And I lay in bed and I try to reflect on all the things that I'm so grateful for. And I just find myself getting pissed that cancer killed him early, because it's hard not to have this kind of cosmic anger at the world for taking the best people out of it so early, while guys like Trump are still doing just fine and seem to be, well, I mean, allegedly.
Full steam ahead.
Fine. So I was just thinking.
He does have the hand mark.
Before our grandfather died, he gave us this large book that was hundreds of pages of journal entries about the kids and the grandkids, long journal entries, paragraphs and paragraphs that gave me a new perspective on my childhood. He was writing about all the crazy shit we were doing, the good stuff, the bad stuff. When I was 7 years old, somebody asked me why I don't like Sarah Palin. And I said, it's because I'm allergic to nuts. 2008. And it's just this invaluable thing. And it's made, processing our loss of him so much more kind of beautiful, because we have this relic of the old times and we get this look into his soul through the way that he saw us. So Tim, you've got your beautiful daughter, Toulouse. Our listeners, you've got families, write shit down about them. It's more valuable than gold.
Cameron, you're just full of surprises. I never know when you say we're going to have a new segment, whether it's going to be something completely unserious and sarcastic, or whether you're going to tug at my heartstrings and make me, get verklempt.
I wish you could have met my grandpa, Tim. He would have been like, wow, how is this clever, smart man wasting his time on a podcast with my grandson? And you would have been like, man, how does Cam come from this guy?
I doubt it on both counts. You're giving me two mixed feelings inside my body right now. One is kind of a sweet, emotional, wistful feeling about you and your relationship with your grandfather. And then another one is like, fuck, I haven't written anything in my child's journal in like 4 years. So now I feel bad. I'm getting guilt and wistfulness, sweet and sour.
You seem to mention her pretty frequently, so maybe one day she can listen to 1,000 hours of Bulwark podcast.
I do. Well, hopefully before the AI becomes sentient and takes over our society, and puts in place a kind of an evil Elon Musk, Mark Andreessen hybrid with like a cone head. Before that, hopefully what AI could do is go through my 100,000 hours of podcasts and like just grab the parts where I say Toulouse and put them into like a nice little package for her. That feels like a doable thing for a LLM.
Well,
Sam Altman.
Yeah, I mean, we'll run out of water before we have enough to support AI doing that. But anyway, you sent me an article. We're done with the feelings, done with that gay bullshit. We're going to get into the real stuff.
J.B. Pritzker, he's kind of a jolly man. And he was in New Hampshire, which is where you go if you're thinking about running for president. He spoke to 800 woke libs. I'm sure some of our viewers, hello, we're in the building. And he had this to say.
Never before in my life have I called for mass protests, for mobilization, for disruption, but I am now. These Republicans cannot know a moment of peace. They have to understand that we will fight their cruelty with every megaphone and microphone that we have. We must castigate them on the soapbox and then punish them at the ballot box.
Cam, what do you think? What do you think about JB? Like, are people like just kind of people do like a jolly fat guy? Like, do you think that there's some ironic JB Pritzker memes online that I see? I don't know who's behind that, whether that's youth or not. But do you have any thoughts about it?
I'm just nervous woke is going to get mad at me for talking about how he's fat, because the thing is, when I talk about how Pritzker's fat, I mean it in a good way. I'm like yeah.
PHAT?
No, like, jolly fat JB Pritzker, fun fat guy. Maybe he'll be able to out-fat Donald Trump when he reruns in 2028, excuse me. I think Pritzker's cool. I think the whole, like, rich guy, but I'll pay my taxes thing works with people who don't look very far into things. And he's got vim and he's got vibes. He's got energy. I see it. I don't know if I'm going to, announce that I pre-endorse JB Pritzker for president 2028, but he's seems like a good guy, brings good energy to the table.
I agree with that. He seems like he's telling us what he really thinks too, which I like about him. The thing that I wonder, do you have any buddies that have moved to Illinois?
Yeah, that's a tough one, isn't it?
You're a global youth. You've got friends that have moved a lot of places, LA, New York, Miami, I'm sure, probably internationally. Do you know anybody that's moved to Illinois?
No, I know one guy who went there, but that was for college. And I know our former guest, Kat Abu, lives in Illinois.
Oh, Kat Abu just moved to Illinois. That's true.
Yeah, she's running for Congress out there. And I don't know anybody. It seems as though a lot of people are moving out, but I don't know if that's because the state is being run poorly or because it is a fucking frost hell. You had some tweet about that recently where you were like, everybody's moving away from where it's cold.
Yeah, probably because it's a frost hell. Who would want to live in the fucking windy city? Like, not me. Why would I move there? You could live anywhere in the world. If you're a person of means, why would you move there? And if you're a business that's trying to attract people, why would you start a business there? I do get that. Though, hey, I'm coming to Chicago one night only, May 28th. If you're watching this, you want to see us live, go to thebulwark.com/events. And so the Chicago people might not want to come after they hear this take, but I don't know that there's a ton appealing about moving there unless like you're like kind of a hefty guy from the Midwest. If you're like, you went to Purdue and, you ate a lot of carbs and you like the cold, you like to shovel, might make sense to move to Illinois. So I think that part of it's that, but I don't know. It makes it a tough case to like say I should run the whole country when like, your state isn't exactly knocking it out of the park. Maybe that doesn't matter in this day and age. But I guess if I was going to do one negative thing about JB, that's the thing that would hang over it for me.
Well, I'm sure there's some politics to this that I don't understand. But yeah, it's like you want to move to this fucking subarctic Great Lakes nightmare when like we're about to go to war with Canada for the Great Lakes anyway, and all of them are going to be renamed the Lake of America. Like, I'm not in on that. I don't know why somebody would want to live there. And I hate to be the lib in the room, but I think this speaks to a greater issue that we're going to be seeing in the coming years and decades, which is climate migration, because the weather is getting more aggro, as some might say. It's getting more, it's acting more like a top in many areas. And I don't think people are going to want to see that. I mean, you had all these stories about like this huge fucking migration to Florida from people who didn't want to pay taxes. And now the insurance rates are going crazy because the hurricanes are ripping Florida to shit every year. My dad's moving out of Florida, by the way.
Where's he going?
We're not entirely sure right now, but they're looking in like North Carolina. I think they looked at one place in Tennessee. It's just so expensive.
Yeah, prices are high. I'm still trying to get over the weather imagery you laid out there. Well, anyway, I guess my Pritzker thought I have this tendency to start with the negative. I should focus on the positive. I like to, compliment sandwiches are a healthy way to deal with people. Be like, you did a great job with this. Work on that. But also, this was good. I should have complimented sandwiched JB Pritzker, but that was a good speech in New Hampshire. It was a good speech. The energy is right. The fuck these assholes thing is right. The go investigate the Trump cabinet is right. I like all that. I also just wish, Illinois was a little bit more dynamic economically. Okay, you got to pick a news item. You tell me your news item first, and then we'll talk about Gen Z's struggles to read.
I did pick a news item, and I wrote it down on my legal pad.
That's nice.
So, over 100 immigrants.
Can we get a closer look at that legal pad? I want to see your handwriting.
Well, here's the funny part. I actually have 3 different topics all on one page, which is I'm trying to write a fantasy novel right now, and I've got maps on it. I'm trying to figure out and then I have notes about the revenue model for the theater that I work at, because I'm trying to figure out our development budget and how much money we want to spend on new works and developing projects that already have producers attached. And then I have notes about the FYPod episodes. So
Renaissance,
quite literally,
man.
3 different things. Renaissance in the sense that I'm pulling from that period in history for my fantasy novel. So over 100 immigrants have been arrested in a raid of an underground nightclub in Tim's home state of Colorado. And the interesting thing here, other than the administration continuing to go fucking crazy on immigrants, is running security and involved with alleged crimes that were happening at this underground nightclub, including, as the DEA tells us, guns, prostitution, drug trafficking. The people running security at this club were active duty military. Kind of weird, right? I don't think that's what they were supposed to be doing. The active duty military.
More than a dozen active duty military members were either patrons or working as armed security. See, they're on both sides of the deal there.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. You'd think that they would have picked one, but maybe one of the armed security guys would see their buddy from the military come in and be like, "Hey, Jack, what are you doing here?" And Jack would have been like, "What are you doing here with a gun?" But the really interesting thing here, other than the fact that supposedly there's a pink cocaine right now, which I never got to try during my drug years, but the gangs that were allegedly hanging out at this underground club, according to the CNN article I read, allegedly were Tren de Aragua, MS-13, which brings to mind that Tim says MS when he's talking about going on MSNBC. This is not MSNBC. This is whatever the fuck MS stands for. And the Hells Angels. And I was just like, okay, what are these gangs doing, like hanging out with each other? Don't gangs famously like not post up like buddies? Like, is there just some sort of fucking ceasefire when they go to the underground nightclub where they let bygones be bygones? Or are they just like, is this like a unified collective gang hangout where they just chat about what it's like to be in violent gangs together?
I have a lot of observations about this. I am with you exactly on, like, I don't believe you when you tell me this is a hangout for Tren de Aragua and MS-13. Like, well, and the Hells Angels? That makes no sense. I believe you, Cameron. I don't believe the government when it comes to this. I was arguing with some fucking moron named my cousin Vinny over on Piers Morgan earlier today, and he kept being like, what, do you think the government is lying to us about these guys being gang members? And I was like, yes. Yes, I do, Vinny. I think the government is lying. I think the government is lying in this case. And my second thought, I quickly Googled the etymology of MS-13 because I was curious myself. And it is so much gayer than you think it would be. They're named after, the M comes from the street in San Salvador, La Mara. The S... the S. Wait, no, hold on. It also is a little bit from the Marabuta, which is a fierce type of ant. And then Salvatrucha is a combination of words Salvadoran and trucha, a word for being alert. So basically they are an alert ant. That's pretty fucking weak. That's the best thing you got? It couldn't have been like a honey badger or some animal, an ocelot. A cool animal.
I don't know how much fear honey badger would inspire either. I know that.
What about a fierce type of ant?
Do you remember the honey badger video that went viral on YouTube? Honey badger don't care.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
That was like fucking 2008. It must have been. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Why were your parents letting you watch YouTube in that year?
Why did John McCain show you that video? Did you work with McCain?
I did.
R.I.P. King.
You had to. God love John McCain. You had to, when you worked for him doing press, you had to carry a lint roller and like brush off his shoulders for him because since he was in a torture prison, he couldn't raise his arms up to like dust off his own dandruff. Really, what a fucking American. Like that's an
Wait,
American with balls, not this
wait. So
guy.
the torture prison gave him dandruff, including on the
And
campaign.
no. Well, I think the dandruff came from being an old man, like quite old.
Okay.
The torture prison, you're holding your arms back like a lot, and so there was some kind of tendon. I'm not a doctor, but there's some kind of tendon injury that prevented him from raising his arms up enough to like brush off his own shoulders. You know that he was
Well,
in that kind of pain his whole life. What a fucking American! What a fucking American!
I was just going to say, I imagine he had trouble dancing to the YMCA song, which Trump would never have an issue with that. Trump didn't mention in his Truth Social post about this when he was talking about what a tremendous victory this was against the migrants. He didn't mention the active duty military guys there. I wonder what that was about, because we should be celebrating the fact that we were arresting alleged criminals. But when I looked at his boast about this operation, there was no mention that our own military guys were hanging out.
You know, the military thing makes this all very complicated for Trump because there's another story simultaneously that's happening. This is in California. I forget which base it was. It was a naval base in California where a woman got deported over the weekend. And her husband was obviously active military since she got deported from the base. And people came in and seized her. Like ICE came in and seized her and took her away and like immediately deported her. And it's like, you know, it's easy for these assholes to like paint a picture that's like, oh, these are the worst people. They're all drug dealers. They're all ruining the country. It complicates the picture when one of the people you're deporting is married to an active duty military personnel. It complicates the picture when 100 of the people that you're deporting were being essentially protected by active duty military personnel. It complicates the picture when you're deporting children of, those who are serving the country or people that were DACA and then served the country, and so like, this is why their fucking lame ass propaganda they think is going to work, why they have like the pictures of the scary guys on the White House, because like that's the only way that this fucking un-American immigration regime is possibly going to succeed is by convincing people that it's only the scary people that are there on the lawn of the White House today with their little lawn signs.
Can you talk?
Have you not seen that picture yet?
Because I saw the picture, but just for those in our audience who aren't familiar, Trump put a bunch of pictures of alleged gang members who I guess are intimidating looking out on the White House lawn.
Yeah,
he just posted them up.
Very gauche. Yeah.
Gauche is a great word for it.
Just to be like, I don't know, to get attention. Like, see, we got rid of these scary guys. Aren't you guys happy with us?
That's like feudal lords, putting severed heads up on their fucking castle walls.
Yeah, on the stakes, like on the way to the on the way to the Capitol.
Game of Thrones ass shit on Trump's part, and it's just like pathetic. It's like they're so desperate for people to be like, yes, fascism, that they're out here posting these pictures of God knows who and God knows what any of them might have done. There's some fucking scary looking dudes I know who aren't involved with who, as far as I know, are not involved with any gang activity. I lived with a guy named Chris. If Trump had put a picture of Chris up on the White House lawn, people would have been like, "Oh, thank God that guy's not out on the streets. He could have beat the shit out of me." This is me and Chris. Yeah. Chris is 6'5", hundreds of pounds of muscle. Looks like Jason Momoa, and this is not a real American flag behind us, by the way. This is Photoshop. But it's just like it goes. You know what it is? It's the Republicans' obsession with image. Republicans love exploiting the way that people can be moved by the way something looks. This guy looks scary. This businessman looks like he could make us money. It's what, Trump Tower, everything's gold. It's all gilded. Like it's all about appearances. It's not about reading or looking further into it or finding the information. It's about what things look like on the surface. And that is Very terrifying.
Yeah, my friend DC Big John looks even scarier than your friend. The
Sebastian, can you throw up a picture of DC Big
oh
John?
yeah, well, you find him, DC Big John. Oof, he's such a sweetheart at heart. You know, they all are always. Here's the thing: as a former Republican obsessed with image, can I tell you one other thing that bothers me about the White House lawn thing? Is like again, and you'd think this is something that people in the Trump White House would care about, but obviously they're too busy like trying to do the Game of Thrones shit, as you called it. It's like, what if you're a person that is like, what if you're a school? What if it's a group of school kids from Kansas, and this is their one weekend to come to DC on a trip, and like you want to take your fucking picture outside the White House with these
We
little
aren't
third
in
graders.
Kansas anymore, baby.
And it's like, this should be a place of purity. And I know it's been made impure deeply by by Trump and, probably Bill Clinton too, but mostly Trump. It's been made impure. But like, the kids on a school trip to DC like should be able to get their picture taken in front of the White House and not have like some rapist like on a yard sign behind him because like Trump is trying to scare everybody. Like the whole thing is, obviously there are bigger issues at play with his immigration, regime than that, but it still is annoying. It still
But
bothers
that's the Trump regime as a whole. It's not about inspiring hope. It's about cultivating fear. And they're very good at it because, like I said, it all really needs to be is surface level. So to all of you watching this, just remember, you don't necessarily need to take everything our military and intelligence says. We don't need to necessarily think that that's the truth. I don't want to turn everybody into a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, but these people do lie. Famously, quite often, Alan Dulles, first civilian director of the CIA. That's another Gen Z thing we talk about on the show all the time is Alan Dulles. Yeah. He told quite a lot of lies. And, when documents become declassified many years later, we learn about how many things our military and our intelligence does that were rather unsavory. But I don't know if that's going to happen for the Trump administration because I don't know what of the atrocious things they're doing they're actually documenting. So who knows if we'll ever know the full truth of all of the Trump administration's crimes and violations of our system. But not good. Not good here on FYPod. We're not happy with this.
Thinking about things that aren't good. Our final topic. Multiple studies have shown that the most online generation, yours, is also the worst at discerning fact from fiction on the internet. So on to give a bunch of examples of this, including the fact that many Gen Zs did not believe that Helen Keller was real for a long time. And then another one is that the Gen Zs like to get their fact checking through the comment section on their social media apps. They tend to feel comfortable relying on aggregate trust to see what has the most upvotes on TikTok or Reddit, or they'll rely on Yelp reviews or Amazon reviews. This is alarming to me for one reason, one main reason, and then we can laugh about Helen Keller. And that is that I had this 8 years ago when I was a nubile 31, 33-year-old, however the fuck old I was, doing these interviews when people were like, after Trump won the first time, when I would, go on somebody's podcast and they'd be like, what do you think about this Trump thing? Do you think it might end? And I was like, well, there are two things that give me hope. One is hopefully some crisis will happen. And so people will realize that we can't be so stupid to put somebody like this in charge, given, how serious of a job it is. And then COVID happened and like people turned on the Democrats for wanting you to wear a mask. And then the other thing I thought was like, eventually the people who are like getting tricked by Trump's propaganda will die off. We're not rooting for that. We love our grandparents, as you mentioned at the beginning of the pod, but that eventually we'll get to a point where people will come up into the electorate who are more native to these online tricks and gimmicks, and so they will be less likely to be, swayed by propaganda, and so these things won't work as well in the future. Those were two theories I had. Both of those have turned out to be totally wrong. It sounds like.
Yeah, just to get more specific, in this article that you sent, great article, a video about the 2016 Democratic primary voter fraud being caught on tape was shown to 3,446 high school kids. Now, It turns out this footage of ballots being stuffed in this rigged Democratic primary election was from our near future, Russia. And this is something that could have easily been Googled, but Stanford researchers studying young people, media literacy, showed it to these kids, and only 3 of the 3,400 kids got the picture. Russia. So that brings to mind
Only 3?
3 out of 3,400 were aware that this was Russia, which really elucidates the myth of the digital native. Now, this is something that a guy named Joel Breakstone
Elucidates.
said.
Look at you.
Yeah, Joel Breakstone called it the myth of the digital native, which Breakstone, as a fantasy novelist or aspiring fantasy novelist, sounds like the name of like a fictional Viking. Joel Breakstone. Now, yeah, people think that since we grew up using the internet that we'd be more savvy. And let's keep in mind that boomers, silent generations, if they have a phone, Gen X, every generation right now has a serious media literacy problem. It's not just Gen Z, but
No doubt.
Our parents didn't really know how to get ahead of the media literacy issue. They didn't really raise us with an awareness that this was going to be such a problem. But parents your age, parents soon to come, can really focus on making sure their kids know how to discern the difference. Now, it says 3/5 of Gen Z between ages 13 and 26 say they get news from social media. Now, keep in mind, this is the ones who are willing to admit that. And this is the ones who even read the news at all, which isn't everyone. But it's important to note that there's a difference between getting your news from social media and getting your news on social media, because we get our news on social media. We see journalists post on Twitter, Blue Sky, whatever, links to their articles. But then you get people who get their news from like selfie video people on TikTok, right?
Yeah.
So finding your news on social media, very different than getting your news from some asshole on social media.
Yeah, I mean, the selfie video people are very concerning. I don't know. One thing, I was talking to Jonathan Rausch last week, who had some thoughts about this, an Atlantic writer, Brookings guy, and he was, I'm just going from memory here, so please fact check me. Guys, understand the difference between fact and fiction here, but I think he was talking about Finland, some Scandinavian country, where they start to teach like at age 7, identifying the difference between truth and fiction. And then they start to do it in like multiple languages. So the Finnish kids can now understand the difference between truth and fiction in 2 languages better than like our adults can in 1. Anyway, maybe that's an urban legend, but it's a good idea, I think. To me, it's like in 4th grade, I'm trying to think what I was learning in social studies class, but maybe just like instead of teaching people about World War I, we should just take that year off the plate and just replace it with showing students for a full year like TikTok videos of real things versus TikTok videos of fake things until they can pass a test where they get like 8 out of 10 right. Maybe that would be a useful, like just a full year of that might be helpful.
I mean, respectfully, we don't have enough time left in the episode for me to pop off about the way we're taught United States history, because there's a lot of pretty key details to our history that were conveniently left out in my AP US history class. I left high school when I dropped out thinking that when World War II started, the Nazis, these bad guys, were doing these concentration camps, and America saw it and was like, oh, we're going to get involved. And I was like, hell yeah, America. We saw the bad guys and we got right on it. And then later I learned that our intelligence agencies did really everything they could to keep the truth of the concentration camps away from our president. And we turned away Jews that were trying to flee to America. And I didn't learn these things. So yeah, we should be teaching media literacy to kids in school instead of fucking Lord of the Flies. Oh my God, the commenters are going to be so mad at me for that. Let me tell you, our commenters, whenever they love me, it's for the wrong reason. And whenever they hate me, it's for the wrong reason. They're so rarely on. But
I think people are going to love that. I totally agree with you on that false.
Well, for our algorithm's sake, I have to ask our audience, please comment below what you think is really missing from our teenagers' U.S. history classes. What do they need to know?
I want to know more about that as well. All right, Cameron Kasky, you really slayed on today's podcast.
Thanks, Tim Miller. You did too, man. This is just another great fucking Monday episode on the books.
We have a great guest coming Saturday, and I'm going to leave right now and go write a note to my daughter. I appreciate you, Cameron. Everybody else, we'll see you all later.